They always talk about the army, and they have this, thing about the army. Well, I think about, Deborah type qualities. And Deborah, first I want to talk about her qualities, her distinct qualities. One, Deborah was strong. A lot of women don't want to talk about strength. Well, I want to talk about being strong, but I want to talk about it in a way that will lift up women. One, she was a well-known military leader. Yes, this woman of God was a well-known military leader when the entire nation was in despair. This woman of God, yes, she was a very well-known military leader. Brave, she was called by God to lead at a very terrible time. She was wise. She served God and his people with wisdom and knowledge. She was supportive to her husband. She was motherly. She was obedient. She was respectful. She was impeccable. She was amazing. She was loving. She was tender. What made Deborah special in the eyes of God? What made her very special in the eyes of God? The story that made me think about Deborah was that she was the one that I don't want to bring up who she was all together yet, was that matters because she was a judge. Back in that day, she was a judge appointed by God. She was a judge appointed by God to lead and guide the people of Israel into ways of righteousness. She judged were regional leaders who arbitrated cases between people and helped the people follow God and occasionally fought battles against their enemies. Yes, this woman of God did that. Yes, she did. And I want to tell you where she first started doing that, under a palm tree. Yeah, Deborah, a judge, used and held court while sitting beneath a palm tree. She was wise and helped the people solve their problems. And she told Barak, and listen now, when I was trying to figure out how to say her husband's name, but let's go to the Bible in that. So let's go to Judges, the 4th chapter in the Old Testament. Judges, the 4th chapter. And I kind of want to read a little bit. Okay? And let's start with the first verse. And I believe that I'm going to go to, it's Judges, the 4th chapter, first verse. 4th chapter, in the first verse. And I think I'm going to do the Amplified and see how it reads. Okay, and if I don't say the name right, please forgive me. Everybody that's reading, that knows how to read it in Hebrew and all the other languages, please forgive me before I mess it up. Okay, I'm going to ask you to give me a little grace. And it says, Judges in the 4th chapter, the first verse, and I'm going to read down to the I guess, let me just read the first 4 verses and we'll go from there and we'll see how it goes. But after Ehud died, the Israelites again did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Assyria, who dwelt in Hazeroth Hagelim, fortress or city of the nations. Then the Israelites cried to the Lord, for Jabin had 900 chariots of iron, had severely oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Nebaioth, judged Israel at that time. She sat under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramoth and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites came up to her for judgment. And she sent and called Barak, son of Abiam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you, Go gather your men and Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun? And I will draw out Sisera, the general for Jabin's army, to meet you at the river Kishon, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into your hand. Okay, now, who's talking? Who is she telling this to? Who is Deborah talking to? Well, Deborah judge used to hold court while sitting beneath the palm tree. She was wise and helped the people solve their problems. Now, she told Barak, the commander of an army of Israel, that the Lord wanted him to fight an enemy named Sisera. But Barak refused to fight unless Deborah accompanied him. Now listen, let's read the rest. Let's read the 7th verse, because I want to read more so you hear it. Now this is a woman of God who is a judge and prophetess. Now she's already told him he's going to go in and fight. Now the reason I played the music about, who do we talk about? Who do we just hear about? Mahalia Jackson. And who accompanied? She went Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King always would call her, and she sung. You know, sometimes I believe she would sing and would accompany him. I mean, a lot of times. And, you know, a lot of great men, a lot of them, and you didn't know that, they would have had great women that we didn't even know about, that would accompany them, and they would call for encouragement. Now, our mothers and grandmothers, and I know that a lot of us don't even know this, while we were even sleeping, resting, these wise women, grandmothers, I know my grandmother, and great-grandparents were worshipers, prayer. They're 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning at the church. Churches back in the day were left open, and they were in there praying before going to work. When they were back in the fields back in the day, they were praying and worshiping. It wasn't nothing to pray. You could go in there, and they were in the kitchen very early in the morning washing dishes, singing and praying. And that's why I asked the question about, and I'm saying this to not only to me, but to many of us today, young people, are you a Deborah? Your leadership is needed. So as we go into the next verse and the 7th verse, and I ask the question, and here is the 7th verse where Barak is talking, and I want to go into the 7th verse of Judges 4th chapter, and the 7th verse where she says, and I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you at the river Kishon with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into your hands, is what God is saying. And she tells Barak that. And Barak says to her, to Deborah, if you will go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. That's what Barak says. And the 9th verse, she says, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the trip you take will not be for your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh, fulfilled in Judges 4:22. So let's go to 4:22. Now y'all hear what I just said, okay? Now let's read the 10th verse first before we go to 4:22. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and he went up with 10,000 men at his heels, and Deborah went up with him. Okay? And maybe we're going too fast. I don't want to go to 4:22 yet, because I want to say some more about Deborah. What type of woman was Deborah in the Bible? In the Hebrew, Deborah's name means bee, B-E-E. Have you ever heard them use bee, B-E-E? Have you heard that word before? Just thought I'd throw that in. She was a prophetess and judged the Israelites. As a prophetess, she expressed the will of God through divine means. And as a judge, she judged the Israelites to ensure they were living according to God's commands. And a lot of people probably wonder why she sat under a palm tree. The palm tree was a symbol of justice, as it provides an open, neutral place to arbitrate. And when where everyone could hear, and not all her negotiations were resolved under a tree. But, however, since blood and murder were just around the corner, God allowed the Canaanites King Jabin to oppress the disobedient Israelites. He allowed it. So, wow, that's something. I guess that's something to think about, isn't it? What was the strengths of Deborah? I already mentioned some of them. She was courageous. She was brave. It sounds like she had a very wise heart. She listened to God. She was very obedient, sounds like, because she was able to, and she was balanced. It sounds like she was able to understand right and wrong. So she was balanced in understanding. She was very wise, and she heard God. She truly was courageous. She was called by God to lead at a very difficult time when others could not lead. She was there to lead. Deborah stepped forward with bravery in obedience to God to lead the Israelites in times of challenge and in oppression. In times when they were oppressed, she was very obedient and ready to lead. And again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Still, they did evil. Nobody's perfect. She still had one thing that was they mentioned, and she had an issue, but I will mention that when I move on. They did, in the book of Judges, it stated that Deborah was a prophet, a judge in Israel, and the wife of both, and we did talk about that. It seems like she had still a great amount of respect for her husband, a great amount, and he seems to not have a problem with her. Who did Deborah prophesy about? Now, we just talked about that. That she prophesied that a woman... Let's go back. I will tell you. So let's go to Judges 4:22. 4:22. But let's read down to it. Go to the 16th verse. 15th. 4:16. Judges 4:16. Judges 4:16. And the Lord confused and terrified Sisera and all his chariots' drivers.